I would not stop for the rest of the next hour, so I'm not even going to start. I will just say that she is one of 3 members of the Trio Ariadne, who is our artist in residence at the Green Music Center. Do I have that right? And she's a pianist, as you can see. She also works in a duo in Anderson and Rowe that I think she's going to introduce us to a little bit. She attended the Juilliard School and also the Academy associated with Carnegie Hall. She's basically performed everywhere you can possibly name or imagine that is an important music venue in the world, it seems like. And I really, really, really strongly recommend that you can become familiar with her through YouTube. Look for some of these Anderson and Rowe videos that I think Elizabeth is going to share with us today because they're great. I spent a lot of time this morning just enjoying them. What we're doing today is we are continuing our process of opening up questions of identity that are related to cultural issues, artistic issues, rather than just sort of purely simply scientific issues, which are also very, very important. So all the inputs that our culture gives us, literature, stories, TV, all these things that come from our society to teach us various aspects of who we are. That's what we're looking at today. Today we really turn, I hope and believe, to music. Many of us, myself included, especially, like around the time of adolescence, we find our way, we find our identity through music. I certainly did. I think that Elizabeth might tell us some things about that, or maybe some of her own stories and how that works. So that's really kind of it. Please give a warm, heavenly welcome to an incredible, incredible privilege we have here.
Thank you so much. Hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, guys. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Scott, for that very generous introduction. I just wanted to say that I'm so delighted to see all of you. I just want to commend you for making it to this point in your lives. College, from personal experience, was a transformative experience for me. And I hear that you're exploring the idea of identity, and I feel like this is the time in your life that you will shape your identity and that you will come to discover important epiphanies about yourself and your purpose. But that also it's okay if you feel like you don't have certainty as you ask these questions of yourself. And actually, that's just to warn you, because I am a bit older than you guys, the questions will continue. And if anything, I think it's sort of a sign of being human that you'll always consistently ask yourself, what is my purpose? What things give my life meaning? What can I give to others? And as a musician, I feel like I'm constantly juggling, I'm constantly working with the idea of identity, and it is a truly rich and actually kind of ineffable, indescribable thing. I almost think that in society and life, we always are told to define ourselves, put ourselves in different categories, in terms of what we like, who we associate with, what our political beliefs are, what our religious beliefs are, our family background, our school affiliations, et cetera, et cetera. And while those things are certainly valuable, and they do give our lives a certain kind of structure, I also feel that one's true identity is something that is beyond description and that is utterly personal. And what I find so valuable about being a musician is that this context in which I work with it's kind of abstract. And because I'm a pianist, I'm not dealing with words. You hear songs on the radio and you know that they're singing about a certain topic, like love or betrayal or having fun or whatever. And the music that I play, sometimes there is a narrative, but otherwise it's something that is flexible and that I can bring to it my own personal take or experience, but the audience can also take something else from it. So just to start, I know you guys probably looked at this already, but I think it's always, I'm into words, I like etymology. So I'm going to do a very mundane thing, and I looked up the word identity. Did you guys do this already? I'm curious, but If not, let's just take a look. So, dictionary.com, identity, the state or fact of remaining the same one or ones as under varying aspects of conditions. You can see examples. A condition of being oneself or itself and not another. Condition or character as to who a person or what a thing is. The state or fact of being the same one as described. The sense of self providing sameness and continuity and personality over time, and sometimes disturbed in mental illnesses as schizophrenia. Anyway, it's kind of interesting, but to me it seems surfacey. You know, there's all this talk about like identity and like that's what it means, but who can really define what it is? And that's actually kind of a rhetorical question. Like if I asked you, what do you think of identity? Like what is it? What would you say? When I say the word identity, what are some of the words that you associate? Maybe like, let's forget about dictionary.com. Do you guys, any hands? Yeah.
Who I am.
Who you are? Nice and simple, but yeah, that pretty much encompasses it. Anything else?
Like
Gender identity, great. Well, I'll get back to that in a second. Any others? I mentioned political, religious, family, talk about gender. Anything else that you think of that's personal, or maybe that society tells you what identity is? Yeah. Absolutely. Who feels like, in a way, that it's hard to describe oneself because that almost seems like a limiting thing? Just like raise your hand. Right? Like I can relate to that because I can say that I'm essentially introverted, which I believe that I am, but I'm a performer as well, and I really like people. So in a way, it's like sometimes taking these adjectives or terms can feel constricting. And sometimes it's useful. Sometimes it gives you a place in the world if you feel like, I'm this unique being. You know, my name is Elizabeth. This is what I like to do. These are the traits that define who I am. That's fine, but I also feel like it can be a little bit circumscribed, a little rigid. I want to go back to gender, though, because all of you are reading Middlesex, right? And in my experience, reading that book, it's just such a revelation because there are certain things that we just take for granted, right? And we have kind of highly defined ideas about gender, what it means to be female or male. And what I thought was interesting is it reminded me of an experience I had teaching at Smith College in Massachusetts. Western Mass actually reminds me a lot of this part of the world because there's a lot of farmland and it's beautiful, but the weather isn't as good. But I remember going to some sort of seminar or event at Hampshire College, just about 15, 20 minutes away. And I thought it was really cool that there was a bathroom that had neither male or female, like men or women, sign on it. It was just blank. And in a sense, it sort of was a reminder that we don't really see this often in society. You know, if you're filling out like the customs form, like I travel all the time, so it's always like male or female, you know, so obviously I check female, but the idea that in Middlesex, there's that question of like not really knowing where the line is, Cal feeling a sort of identifying with both sides, both the male and female, and in a sense that is a source of confusion. But to me, reading it, I also thought it was a kind of revelation because I think that maybe we don't deal with the same issues. Like I can't relate on that level in terms of gender identity, but I can relate to the idea that like oftentimes I feel like I'm in the middle of things, that I feel a connection with two sides of a story, two sides of a coin. And I think that that's where music comes in to play, is that there's not just one thing that you associate with, but that you can find meaning in both sides. So anyway, I'm going to give you a little background of my life and my kind of professional endeavors, just to give you a context. But out of curiosity, how many of you in here play an instrument? Good amount of people. How many of you out of that group play like classical music? Okay, so the rest of you like play guitar or like piano or pop or saxophone, jazz, like other genres. How many of you have been to a classical concert? Okay, good. Okay, so just right off the top, what are your thoughts about classical music? Any, like, you can shout out words or When I say the words classical music, what comes to mind? What? Bach? Johann Sebastian Bach? Okay, that works. Other great, one of the greatest composer maybe of all time. What else? Anybody from this side? Classical music, when I say classical music. Long? Like the concert is long or the pieces are long? Yeah, like compared to when you're on like the top 40 station, the songs are like 3 minutes or less. And like a classical piece can be like 40 minutes or whatever. Okay. Any other more descriptive terms? Yeah. They can tell stories. Excellent, excellent. Do you have any specific pieces in mind, or like do you remember? The Tempest, great. Do you play piano or just? Okay, okay, excellent. The Tempest by Beethoven definitely was inspired by Shakespeare's Tempest play, and it's also a very tempestuous piece. Other thoughts?
There's a lot of emotion.
There's a lot of emotion. Great. I'm actually very bolstered and encouraged by these answers, because what I was afraid of coming in was to be like boring, like ancient, not relevant, and I think you guys. I think the fact that you all have some kind of connection to music is really useful, because I feel like you are open-minded to different styles, and maybe you've had a good experience playing music or listening to music. So in my opinion, I think it's actually never too late to cultivate and to change your tastes. And one of the things that I hope you encounter in college in this class and just through your experiences here is learning how to expand your perspective and almost venture into things that feel foreign, because that is a way that I've sort of developed my identity. My tastes have changed over time, and not that those things define me, but that I grow through seeking the things or through opening my eyes to things that might not seem instantly familiar. So I just wanted to talk about my background. Luckily, I grew up in a family that loves music. And so I grew up with it feeling like a very, very natural thing. And I just felt as if music was a part of life. And I began piano when I was 6 years old. And I immediately fell in love with it. My first instrument was the violin. And I was I don't think I liked it. How many of you play violin in here? It's a little awkward, right? Especially when you're a beginner, you like put it under your chin and you have the stickers on the bow and it sounds really squeaky. And I was 5, and I think I just went because my older sister, she was taking lessons. And my older sister's 11 years older, by the way, so she was kind of a role model. And so I took those lessons, and even at the age of 5, as you can tell in your own experiences or even from like Middlesex, your kind of predilections and your tastes get shaped quite early. And again, your tastes and your sort of affinities are related to identity, I think. So I realized, I was like, you know what, this doesn't resonate with me. At 6, I switched to piano, and I instantly fell in love. It just felt right. And I don't know if you guys feel that way with like a sport or dancing or some kind of like academic activity, or just like sometimes there's a certain activity that just sparks your imagination and your sense of possibility, and that's what the piano was for me. And what I thought was so great was, you see the piano has 88 keys. It's kind of like literally this landscape of possibility. And my first teacher, Mrs. Jones, who was she was kind of the epitome of a cat lady, because she was older and she did have cats. And she's very sweet. She was just in the neighborhood. One of her first assignments to me was to compose a piece of music. Like, think about that, composing a piece of music and having no training. Like, I didn't really know how to read music. I didn't really know what fingers to use. But when you're 6 years old and your teacher's like, you know what? Make something up. That's actually very freeing. And it's something that I still carry with me today, this idea that experimentation, trying things out, not really worried about the solution or getting something right or getting it perfect, but kind of like using your creativity and using a blank slate, tabula rasa, to create something is such a beautiful metaphor for identity. Because in a way, like we feel, I think sometimes some of you might feel very grounded in who you are, like you know exactly who you are. But others of you might feel like, you know what, I don't really know what I believe because everything I've been told is by my parents by my teachers, by my friends, by my boyfriend or girlfriend, by my siblings. And I feel like this is the opportunity, and actually as you go on through life, to take this blank slate, pretend like your life is the keyboard, and you compose a life. You compose some sort of identity. And that's not to say, again, we live in a world that is quite superficial. I mean, I'm on social media, but like, are all of you on Facebook? Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, blah, blah. Like, all that stuff is great. Like, I like the idea that we're connecting to people. We're really kind of, like, we have a way to keep in touch, because some of your friends might be in other parts of California or the country or the world. But the thing that concerns me is that I think a lot of times we shape our identity based on our Facebook profile, like based on our likes, based on, you know, like kind of the superficial. And I think that identity is something where you have to delve past this thing about, oh, I really care about what these people think about me. It should not be about that. So anyway, going back to my story, I really fell in love with piano. I continued with it, and then I really sort of, I don't know if this happens to any of you, but I was pretty ambitious early on. I think by the time I was 9, and this happened right after I made a switch to an excellent piano teacher who was really, he's really effective with young students. By the time I was about 9, I was like, you know what, I really want to be a concert pianist. And that was kind of a weird thing to want to be. It's not like I had a lot of, I didn't have any concert pianists in my immediate family. I mean, they all loved music, but my dad's an engineer. My mom actually is sort of a visual artist, so I guess the creative side came in. But how many of you in here like had kind of dreams of being something when you were a kid? How many of you still have that same dream? Nice, okay. So there is something to be said about when you're young and you're kind of pure and you have that sort of idealistic sense, which I hope you guys keep, at least some of it. I think when we get older, it's easy to become cynical. But anyway, I think there's something about being open to the possibility of life. And life has a way, as I've discovered, of kind of shifting your purpose, shifting your dreams. But the fact that you had a sort of goal or an aspiration is beautiful. And I think that that's also tied to your identity as well. But in any case, so I started going to competitions when I was around that age. And when I was concurrently, I was also like in public school. I was very much focused on my studies. And I think that that's something also that shapes me today. To be here as a visiting artist at SSU is a gift beyond measure, because I think that finding a balance between different things. You might have your focus, like you guys are going to pick a major. You guys are going to find something that really excites you. At the same time, you need to kind of learn to keep your eyes open and to balance out the thing that is your major focus. So even though piano from that early age was something that I wanted to devote my time to, I still made sure to like do well in school, to kind of have normal interactions with other people, and to kind of cultivate that other side of myself. So I thought that I would actually play a piece of music that, that is one of the earliest pieces that I've learned. And what I think is kind of interesting about it is that I learned it when I was around 11, and it's still kind of one of my encore pieces. And that's to say that sometimes these early experiences that you have kind of stay with you forever. So I guess, yeah, I'll just play it. And I want you guys to tell me, I'm actually not going to tell you who the composer is. I'm not going to tell you the title. And I want you to just listen, pretend like you've never heard piano music or classical music, and kind of see how it strikes you. Actually, I think I'm going to leave the lid, so. Thank you. Did anyone know randomly what that piece was? It's fine if you didn't. Just wondering. Okay, did anyone have any guesses, composers? Actually, let's not even go there because it doesn't matter as much. Feelings, thoughts as you watched? Yeah.
I like that you have so much movement after hitting the keys. Like that's just as important as hitting the right keys. You have to.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, to me, playing an instrument is very much, it's like a dance. It's very physical. It's sort of, I feel like being a performing musician is a combination, thank you, but it's a combination of kind of athleticism, your intellectual kind of thought process, feeling and emotion, and also kind of communication, because to me, playing that in a practice room on my own and playing it for you guys, it's going to take on a different dimension. Other things besides the movement, yeah.
You seem very passionate while playing.
Yeah, I definitely. And you know, the thing that's interesting is like even when I learned this at 11, I had very little life experience. I mean, not to discount childhood, because I think a lot of your most formative experiences happen in that first decade of life. But you know, it's not like I could really relate to like my heart being broken or, you know, like some devastation. Thankfully, I grew up in Chicago. I didn't have to experience like violence or war or poverty or, you know, something that was very middle class and very normal. And yet there's something kind of primordial about music, and I'm biased, but I think of all the arts, I think that music is maybe the most visceral. It's the most, it kind of hits you in the gut more than maybe a painting. And I actually love the visual arts, but I think it's a combination of sound, of movement, for me also the lack of words, the lack of language, because as much as I would probably have been an English major, but as much as I love words, I find that they can be kind of limiting. So yes, passion plays into it, and that was something that I even felt very passionate about the music when I was 11, and that piece, when I play it, kind of brings me back to those early discoveries of music and what music could do for me, because growing up, I was actually like very shy. I was very quiet. I was basically I was a really good kid. And I almost feel that playing music has allowed me to access that side of myself that's a little freer, a little darker, more passionate, because I'm the kind of person that, you know, it might describe some of you, but I am not a heart on my sleeve kind of person. I am not a volatile person. But sometimes when I play music, I feel like there's this kind of unseen beast that kind of comes out. It's a little bit like, you know, pop stars, when they have like alter egos, like Beyonce is like Sasha Fierce or Beyonce, or I don't know. You know, they have this other side and they're like, I am, and they like access that part. I think that's what's cool about playing music, because you can kind of let certain parts of yourself out, and it's actually pretty private and abstract. And I hope that in some area of your life you can do that, especially if you tend to be the more introverted, the shyer, you know, not as extroverted and exuberant type, that you have some way to channel those feelings and thoughts, which are so valid. And I think that a lot of the issues that we see personally, psychologically, kind of in society, is that people don't have a healthy outlet for those thoughts and feelings. But in any case, that piece was by Sergei Rachmaninoff. And he was a great composer and pianist who lived at the end of 19th century, early 20th century, and that was his prelude in G-sharp minor. So you're kind of surprised that like the piece wasn't really about anything. A prelude is just kind of, a prelude actually means sort of like the beginning or introduction to something. So in a sense, it wasn't about like autumn sky or stormy night or, you know, like my like lost lover. It's just prelude in G-sharp minor. But I still think that that is an opportunity. It's kind of like life when we experience things. It's not like you have a flashing sign saying like, this is a big moment. You know, it's more sort of when you're going through it, in retrospect, you realize it actually has a lot of meaning. So anyway, when I was 13 years old, I had the luck and actually the honor of going to an international competition in Italy. And I ended up winning the prize. And what was amazing about that experience was the fact that I was so self-conscious at 13 that I could just do that, like I think the older you get, sometimes you just put more pressure on yourself, you think a lot more and you kind of complicate things. But there was a kind of like innocence and freedom that came with that experience. But also the fact that I went out into the world. I was in Italy, it was actually Sicily, and I was surrounded by other super talented pianists. And that was such a pivotal moment for me because I felt like, wow, you know, music can truly, this sounds corny, but it can truly transcend the boundaries of language, of, you know, family background or your experience geographically or whatever. And music can really bring people together, and that you can communicate who you are or who you think you are to a vast group of people. So after that happened, I continued being very focused, getting opportunities to perform around the country and the world. But I also had a slight crisis in high school because I was like, and I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but when you feel like you've put in so much energy and time into an activity, you almost feel like, you know what? Like, what if I don't want to do this? I remember being in high school and being like, you know what? I thought I wanted to be a pianist my whole life, but what if I'm missing out on something? What if that's something that's not what I meant to do? And so when I applied for college, I sort of made sure to apply to liberal arts schools, to universities, in addition to conservatories. And I think going through that experience of doubt and kind of being a little bit burnt out at the piano was essential, because when I decided to go to Juilliard for college, and Juilliard is a conservatory, it's a performing arts school, there's drama, dance, and music. When I got there, I think I felt this kind of, this revelation that it really was what I wanted to do. And I think that it was healthy for me to kind of go through that questioning period. Like, you know, I've spent my whole life since I was 6, like a dozen years, kind of working hard at the instrument and finding a lot of my identity being wrapped up with the piano. And then kind of feeling like, you know, I'm not sure I want to do this. And then going to Juilliard, and also like the fact that I didn't kind of cling on to Juilliard as like that place is going to give my life like so much meaning or validation. It was more like, okay, it's a great opportunity, it's a great school, I should try it. And then realizing when I was in New York and being surrounded by people who shared my passion, I was like, you know what, this is incredible, like this is where I want to be. And that said, all of you are freshmen in here, right? So freshman year, from my experience, is a little bit bumpy. I mean, it was a positive experience, but it's natural if it takes you guys to adjust, because it's just it's not high school, you know, and you're in a different environment. There's higher, maybe the stakes are higher in terms of the academic demands and expectations. And also, you're kind of experiencing that transition into adulthood. But that said, I think that this is such an exciting time, because it's fine for you to feel that kind of discomfort and the excitement that comes with almost feeling like you're not completely grounded, and that you're going to get into the groove eventually. I can attest to it. I remember like sophomore year feeling so much more like smooth sailing. But I also feel like this is the opportunity to kind of shed your old selves and to not define yourself by who you were in high school. You know, like thankfully my high school experience is very positive, but a lot of my friends were kind of scarred by high school, because a lot of musicians are kind of neurotic and like outcasts. And they just remember being in high school and being like, oh, like I didn't fit in, I wasn't in the cool crowd, like whatever, like I wasn't on the volleyball team, or like I was the nerd or something. Really, that stuff doesn't matter. Like, I had a great high school experience, but I don't define my life by like the achievements or the failures I had in high school. And so I urge you that even if you had a fantastic experience, that you kind of embrace that and let it go, because there's so much more ahead of you, and there's so much more that you don't even realize at this point. And for those of you that had an awful experience in high school, just have faith that it's over. And you can start anew, and it will be fantastic. It'll be much better than you could see at the time. So anyway, being in New York was a really important experience for me. And I feel like you guys, being here in Sonoma County, it's such a beautiful place. It is a little bit sheltered though, and so I urge you that taking advantage of this college experience through your courses, talking to your professors, like reading interesting literature or articles, you know, like kind of staying up to date with current events, maybe like reading an actual book. Like I think our culture is just so like, I'm starting to sound like an old person, but you know, it's like, oh, everything has to be 140 characters or less, you know? Like, do things that kind of, maybe you didn't have the time to do in high school. Just do things that will kind of expand your mind and your experience, because we are very lucky to be in this beautiful part of the world, but it is a little bit of a cocoon. Whereas like when I was in New York, I was kind of thrust into city life, and I'm like a suburban girl. I grew up outside of Chicago. So for me, it was a little bit of a shock. And actually, my sophomore year was when 9/11 happened. And I have to say that that was kind of a defining experience for me because, I mean, you guys were way too young maybe, but do you guys remember like seeing it on TV and like, you know, all just the news? And to actually be in New York City when 9/11 happened was very, very indelible experience, because there's something about, you know, when we see the news and we see conflict happening in other parts of the world, we're kind of horrified but detached at the same time. But being where I was, I remember waking up and one of my friends calling me and said class was canceled. It was, I had to go to a 10:30 class, so it was like 9:30. And then I turned on the radio and I started hearing all this stuff that wasn't making sense to me. And I saw smoke outside of my window, which is bizarre because Juilliard is at 66th Street on the west side, and the World Trade Center is like, it's like 70 blocks south. So the fact that I could see smoke from, you know, 66th Street was a sign. Like I thought there was a fire like 10 blocks away, but that was the smoke from the first tower that had gone down. And then one of my friends actually, he was getting off the elevator. Juilliard has dorms at like the lobbies on the 11th floor, so it's high enough where you can you have a vista to downtown. And he said that he saw the second tower get hit, and he said he like nearly threw up or passed out because it was just so traumatizing. So we were all huddled around the TV and like just kind of incredulous, and we were told to camp out in Juilliard Theater, which is kind of a space that's like this but underground. And it was just all the students in the dorm camping out because we had no idea what was going to happen that day. And it was a striking experience. It was traumatizing because we were all like worried about the victims. Like we wanted to give blood, we wanted to find a way to help out, but we were also scared, and we had to keep our parents and families in the know. But at the same time, it was a revelatory experience because I remember going to my lesson 2 days later, and I didn't want to play anything. And my teacher, Veda Kaplinski, who's amazing, we had this talk about music, and for those couple days, I sort of felt like, what am I doing at Juilliard? What am I doing playing an instrument? Like sitting in a practice room for 5 hours, like how is that helping people? How is that like, what is that doing after a tragedy and disaster like that? And she kind of gave me this talk, and we arrived at the conclusion that like in civilization, we all need something to kind of hold on to, something that's beautiful and something that gives hope, and something that reminds us of the goodness and the greatness of humanity. And it kind of re-inspired me, it reinvigorated me, it kind of made me less kind of anal about the things that don't matter. Of course, since then I've had to keep reminding myself of like the big picture, but at the time it was very powerful to realize that, you know what, music and art and just love and kind of positive things, you know, not to sound all hippie-tastic, but like that those things are so essential in our lives and in our society. And I believe that more than ever. I mean, when you go to Huffington Post or just New York Times, or when you see the headlines, it's actually really depressing. Seeing all the chaos and the conflict and the corruption that exists in the world, and we even see it kind of very closely. You know, things are political in our lives. Friends might betray us or whatever. So you see that human nature isn't perfect, but there's something about artistic expression that can like channel that discomfort, channel the confusion, sometimes create something that's ultimately so powerful and meaningful. So with that in mind, I wanted to show you a clip of a piece that I think speaks to that really powerfully, but it's also related to my artistic identity. This is a trailer for a project that I did with my piano duo partner, as Scott mentioned. And this is a piece called The Rite of Spring. How many people have heard of that piece? Cool. Have you seen it performed, for those of you, or you've just heard of it? Has anyone ever heard the piece or seen it live? Okay, so for those of you that don't know what The Rite of Spring is, it is one of the masterworks of kind of all time. It was written 101 years ago, 1913. Igor Stravinsky, who was a very important Russian composer living in Paris, composed this piece on the eve of World War I. So I want you to think about the context of World War I. That was the Great War. It was the most devastating and destructive war that the world had seen up to that point. So he wrote this right before it exploded. And I think he was channeling the tension and the conflict of this time into the music. But what's also fascinating, what I love about this, and which reminds me that classical music is not tame, was at the premiere of the piece. It's an orchestral piece that's a ballet, actually. So there was a choreographed ballet by Diaghilev, the great choreographer. And when you think of ballet, right, you think of graceful and Swan Lake and pirouettes, right? Well, Diaghilev choreographed, or actually I think it was Nijinsky, choreographed a very violent, savage, raw dance that the audience, because the sounds of the music were so scary and the visuals were so disturbing, that there was a riot in the hall. This is in Paris in 1913. People were booing, they were yelling, they were leaving the hall. It was there was a big ruckus in the hall. And now, I just want to give you that context because you're thinking of classical music as prim and proper, and that everyone just sits there and they do their little golf clap. No, this was controversial. This is you think Kanye's controversial? This is times 10. So, in honor of the centennial of The Rite of Spring, my duo partner, Greg Anderson, and I created a 10-part music film of this. You guys can check it out. I don't want to show the whole film because that would take up the rest of this period. But I'm going to show you the trailer. And before I show it, I also just want to tell you that Greg is one of the sources of inspiration to me because he is a good friend and a colleague that I perform with and tour with now around the world. But we met when we were students at Juilliard, and we just started playing together because it was fun. And I say this to you guys now because whatever you decide to do, whether it's creative or athletic or academic, you might find a kindred spirit in this room, in one of your classes, in the cafeteria, whatever, and be like, you know what? We totally get each other on a kind of creative, intellectual level, because that's not to say we're totally different people and we don't agree on everything. But there's just sometimes you might meet a person or meet a group of people that kind of push you to go farther than you would otherwise. So I give you those details because it'll be good to keep those in mind. Actually, as I set this up too, The Rite of Spring, the narrative was also controversial because Stravinsky was, in order to channel the kind of violence and the rawness and primordial spirit of the music, the narrative of the ballet is basically the rites and rituals of a pagan tribe in Russia. So very primitive tribe. And what ends up happening is they're performing rites for the god of spring. Rites, in which they have to offer sacrifices, right? And so the ultimate rite, the ballet ends with a virgin who sacrifices herself to death. She's surrounded by this group of creepy elders, and she dances herself to death. So that's crazy stuff, And so just keep that in mind. We decided not to do that as our video because neither of us wanted to be the virgin dying. So you can see kind of how we've interpreted this in a modern context. So here we go, here's the trailer. fire that burns and the sun that gives light. Life is the wind and the rain and the thunder in the sky.
Life is matter and is earth. What is and what is not, and what beyond is in eternity.
So actually, identity is like, not Garnier Fructis, but the reason why I show that to you, it's always kind of embarrassing to watch oneself, but this is actually closely related to identity for a couple reasons. First of all, you saw the fire and the ocean. That was no CGI. We actually burned a piano in the middle of the desert, and we only had one chance, and we also tried to drown it in the Pacific Ocean as we were like in the ocean pretty much naked. And I am not a daredevil at all. I do not go bungee jumping. I don't even ski. I am like super cautious and methodical. So for me to do that, Greg had to convince me because I thought he was crazy. He kind of got his comeuppance because when we were in the ocean, the waves thrust the piano in and ripped his large toenail off, so he had to go to the ER. So I was like, okay, see, that's what I was afraid of. But in any case, the reason why we went to those extreme lengths is because we're not adrenaline junkies. I mean, maybe slightly. But the fact is that the vision of this music is so overwhelming, so powerful that like it kind of deserves this extreme representation. And the other thing, so in a way, I mention that because I've always thought of myself as like very like practical, very like cautious, and then I would do stuff like that. So obviously, sometimes when you define yourself, you kind of limit yourself from doing things that are ultimately worth it, and also show you how far you can go if you really believe in it and if you're passionate. But the other thing is our storyline for this film, if you watch it, you might be a little bit weird, like there were scenes that we were like inspired by, Terrence Malick or, kind of these kind of epic filmmakers where some of it is not obvious because there's no acting, there's no words in the film, it's just the music, but then you'll see visual representations, there's a story that goes through it. But the whole idea of sacrifice, I thought was something that's very relevant to 2013 at the time that we did this. And that's because we live in a very saturated world. As I said, our technology, our iPhones, our, like social media, the expectations that we have from all the people around us. And sometimes we get a little bit distracted by all those things and take it to mean that that's who we really are, that's what we really want from life. And this film is actually all about stripping away a lot of that excess. So what happens from the course of the beginning to the end is that you'll see a lot of materialism. You'll see like an ornate concert hall with a grand piano and I'm wearing this fancy gown. And we kind of have the traditional trappings of a concert. And then slowly we start destroying things. You saw that there was fire. We start kind of shedding things. Like we actually kind of like start disrobing near the end before we go into the ocean. And the idea is that we're literally shedding the things that kind of that we use to define ourselves, because ultimately that's not who we really are. It's getting to that place that's almost, it's kind of primordial. It's something that you already have within. And it's more like chipping away, like, say you have this kind of, this piece of, I don't know, something very precious. Like, there's this bucket of gold. But around it is this like huge kind of block, like a cement block. And the idea is that the pot of gold is who you really are. That's your essential goodness. That's your authentic self. That's like the part that's loving and the part that is, has kind of principles and is kind of undisturbed by what other people think about you. And the cement block is kind of the thing that society imposes upon us, that like all the stuff that we deal with every single day kind of distracts us from. And the idea is that you're chipping away at this block so that you can get to the gold inside. I mean, ultimately that's, if any of you meditate or if you do things that kind of quiet the mind, it's a little bit like that. It's getting rid of that stuff, getting rid of the static so that you arrive at a place that feels true and it feels like it's authentically you. So that's kind of the point of the film, that we sacrifice not a virgin or, our bodies per se, but we try to merge with the earth and we try to merge with that self, that kind of essential self that's really who we are, to go back to identity. So I guess quickly, just to summarize, another identity thought is that musicians are kind of open to reinvention. Can any of you name like a musician or an actor who who makes you think of like, oh, they reinvent themselves? They kind of reset the wheel. Any thoughts? Yeah. Miley Cyrus, right? She was like Hannah Montana, like Good Girl, right? And then she does like Cannonball, where she's like swinging on things. But yeah, she totally took on a different persona, and it's probably more like who she really is, right? Because she was trying to like please Disney or whatever. Any other examples? She's a great example. Yeah. Yes. Right? Because he was like a child star, and he was in like Gilbert Grape and Romeo and Juliet, and he's doing kind of like gritty, like, Martin Scorsese fare right now. And he's very much a method actor, so you can see that he really tries to change his persona. Anybody else in pop culture? Anybody else? Okay, so I was going to mention like Madonna. But actors, just take anybody, and I think that that's a good metaphor for yourselves. Even if you're not a performer, you're not an actor, and in a way they're kind of being fake people, like these actors are taking on different identities. I think that there's actually something to keep in mind, that we have the ability to kind of reshape our priorities and reshape our goals, depending on the phase of life that we're in. And I feel like constantly every day I'm trying to redefine what's important to me, and that will shift. Sometimes it's like, spending time with my family is really important this day, or really like learning this new piece or making this video, or maybe like one concert I want to play Brahms and something very like traditional and very dignified, and another day I might want to do like a cover of a Coldplay song, and that's all legit. It's kind of depending on whatever drives you. So to end, just wanted to play like a 2.5-minute piece. This piece is, some of you might have heard me play this before, but it's called The Revolutionary Etude by Frédéric Chopin. And this is also a piece I learned somewhat early in my growing up. But I like the idea, I'm teaching the music section in the sophomore year creative and research experience, the Seriously class. And we're looking at the year 1848. That was a very important year because revolutions were occurring all around the world, and it was changing the kind of the status of society and culture. And so Chopin wrote this work in response to a revolution happening in his home country of Poland. But I like the idea of revolutionary being that we, in our own ways, can be revolutionary. We don't necessarily have to go picket or go like instigate some uprising and do it through violence. But in our own way, being fiercely who we are and kind of having the bravery to not bend when you really believe in something, or to have the bravery to bend when you're being too stubborn. I think that that is all revolutionary. So I hope you enjoy this piece. Thanks for listening. And here's